All right. Welcome, everyone, to Classics 160 D2, a classical mythology, and today's lecture, 13.2. We are in week 13, Legends of Early Rome. We are going to talk about Romulus and the founding of the early city. We are going to talk about the 7 kings of Rome. We are going to talk about people like, who? Who are the legends of the early republic? Mucius Scaevola and Horatius COCLES, some of the greatest characters in all of Roman history. So I hope you're excited. Get ready for that. Here's what we got on the docket today. We are going to start with announcements, a brief recap, and then what I just talked about, right? So Romulus, when we left off last time, he had just founded the city of Rome. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that he encountered and some of the ways that he dealt with those. Then we'll walk through the legendary 7 kings of Rome. And what we'll see is that even though it's very, 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 very unlikely that there actually were only 7 kings in Rome, we will see that in the Roman imagination and in their conception of their own history, each of these kings served somewhat of a mythological role in order to contribute something to the city of Rome and to kind of the culture of the Roman people. And then finally, we will talk our way through some of the legends of the early republic, these kind of semi-historical, semi-mythological heroes of Rome and how they're remembered for their contributions to the city. So, what do we have on announcements today? You guys know the deal. Go ahead and put it in speaker view. You can see me, you can see the words, you can see the images, you can see all the stuff you need to be successful here. If you have a question, go ahead and shoot that to your TA, and they will either get back to you or funnel that question to me because I'm terrible at doing 2 things at once. And an update on next week again, no live classes next week, right? So do watch the movie Jason and the Argonauts, but there's nothing you have to attend at any given time. I went through this morning, I gave everybody attendance credit for Monday and for Wednesday next week. And so you should be good to go there. All right, let me go ahead and make sure that whoever started whichever one of the TAs started the lecture for today, can you go ahead and make Colin a co-host as well so that he can get messages? Thanks. And then finally, your very, very last reading response, I know you're going to miss these dearly, is due this Friday. So do a good job on that. Finish that strong. And then after that, the final assignments you got the final project due the Friday after Thanksgiving. I mean, not the Friday right after Thanksgiving, but like the first school Friday you have after Thanksgiving. And then the final exam is going to be the following Wednesday during the normal class period. So we are almost through with this party. That makes me sad. It's been such a journey brought to you by Kirkland's Signature Vitamin Rain, one of the most delicious drinks. Acai blueberry pomegranate. It hydrates me after I work out. There you go. Isn't that refreshing? Okay. So will I put together another study guide for the final? Yeah, I'll put together one on there. They're not super useful. Really, it's just a huge list of like almost everything we've covered. But if that's very useful, if it is helpful for you to sit down and like do flashcards or something like that, then I'm more than happy to do that. I'll put that up by Friday this week. Okay, so where did we leave off last time? Oh, good question. Is the final open note? Yep, the final is going to be more or less the exact same as the midterm, right? So it's going to be some number. How many multiple choice questions did we have on the midterm? 25? Okay, yeah. We'll have 25 multiple choice questions. We'll have 1 essay question. And you're going to have 50 minutes, a normal class period to do the thing, okay? Also, if you do have accommodations, get those in by like the week before the exam, right? So the Friday before the exam, make sure all accommodations have been approved through the DRC before then, because I'll sit down that following weekend and make sure that they're all input, so whoever's getting extra time will have that. Will I post the essay questions Oh man, so many. Okay, all right, we got to retreat from recap. We're retreating back to announcements. Okay, so here's the deal. It'll be the same number of questions, 25 multiple choice, 1 essay. I will put the essay questions up ahead of time. TAs, go ahead and throw me 2 essay questions each. All right, and let's see here. We're gonna create a. Okay, here's the deal. The multiple choice questions will not be cumulative. All right, so the multiple choice questions are just going to be over the second half of the course. All right, and the essay question is going to ask you to synthesize stuff between the 2 halves in the course, right? So it might be something about the relationship between the gods and heroes, something along those lines. So that's the way it'll be set up. Essay question, essay question, yes, cumulative. Multiple choice questions, no, not cumulative. I will post a series of 12 essay questions from which I will choose one of those, and those will be up by the end of Thanksgiving week. So TAs, if you want to come up with 2 each, and then after you gather those 10 between you guys, send me a list of those. Do that anytime next week. That would be awesome. Okay, let's see. What other questions? So many questions coming through. Will I post the essay questions? Yes, good. 25 questions, good. Let's see. What else? Yeah, is the final cumulative dealt with? When's the last day to turn in missing assignments? Get those in by the last day of class, okay? So perhaps consider using some of the little break. If you're behind on any reading responses or anything like that, get caught up on those and get those turned in. When's the last day to turn in reading responses? Okay, yeah. Last day of class, Wednesday, December 9th. Boom. All right, now let's move on to where we left off last time, right? And this was our general conception. This is most people's general conception of Roman mythology, right? In Roman religion in general. It's basically taking all these wonderful Greek gods that we got over here and giving them a nice little Roman name, and they are basically more or less the same kind of thing, right? Dionysus becomes Bacchus, Artemis becomes Diana, Ares becomes Mars. And we saw that in some cases, this is more or less kind of accurate. In other cases, with somebody like Mars and Ares, there actually are substantive differences between the gods. One of the other things we saw is we saw the influences coming from 2 places, right? In large part from the Greeks, right? Exemplified by this Nashville temple, recreation of the Parthenon. Has anybody gone to see this temple? I've never seen it. It's in Nashville. It's like supposed to be a fairly authentic recreation of the Parthenon. Looks pretty cool. Anyway, so a combination of influences between the Greeks and the Etruscans. We talked about some of the differences, right? They've got these terracotta statues of gods walking all over the top of their temple. Really cool stuff. And with the Etruscans, right, we talked about some of the unique aspects of their culture, a huge emphasis on divination, right? Figuring out the will of the gods through various different methods. And we saw in the story of Romulus and Remus that one of the ways they do that is by tracking the flights of birds. So Remus is all like, hey, I saw 6 birds fly over the Aventine, right? We should build our city there. Romulus is like, well, I saw 12 birds fly over the Palatine. We should build our city there. And then we get to one of the coolest artifacts in all of classical archaeology. The liver of Piacenza. Piacenza is a place kind of near where it's either housed or found or something like that. But it's a bronze diagram of a liver with little textbook notes in terms of how you're supposed to interpret this sheep's liver to understand the will of the gods. And what we'll end up seeing, or what we do end up seeing, is that Rome adopts a lot of this stuff. So one of the big the big things that Romans take from Etruscan religion is this emphasis on divination. And then I put up this picture of Etruscan tombs just because they're super, super cool and they look like little cute, adorable hobbit holes. And they really did serve as houses for the dead, right? We can see that in the brightly colored decoration on the inside, leading some scholars to think that the Etruscans may have had a slightly more developed sense of kind of the afterlife than the Greeks, who just kind of wander around in the fields forever. All right. And then what we did, right, we closed last time with the story of the earliest days of Rome. And even though we picture Rome as this bulging metropolis, right? In the earliest days, we're talking about a city based on 7 hills. And you can see this little, like, you can see it all right in this little diagram here, right? We've got the Capitoline here with the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. And we've got the Palatine, and we've got the Aventine, and we've got a bunch of other hills that, I don't know, the Esquiline? Is that the Kylian? I don't know. You don't need to remember all the different names. Do remember that Romulus wanted to build his city on the Palatine, and we get our word palace from that. And also remember that Remus wanted to build his city on the Aventine, and that didn't really work out quite as well. And what we did is we talked about the mythological story of the founding of Rome, starting way back, right, with the story of Aeneas. And Virgil writes about this in the Latin epic, the Aeneid, part of which you're going to be reading for Friday. And then he travels all around the Mediterranean in search of Italy, right? In terms of all these quests, he lands on the Italian shores and then starts a race of people there that eventually turn into Romulus and Remus, and then the later emperors of Rome. Now, this raises one of the major issues with like kind of studying the founding of ancient Rome, right? Rome's earliest days. We have these stories about it, right? But they are written 750 years after this event was supposed to have occurred. And not only that, we'll hear about this probably on Friday. TA is on Friday. Yeah, if you can talk about Virgil and the Aeneid and kind of like some of the political implications of that. One of the things we're going to see is that like, this isn't some text of somebody trying to produce an accurate representation of what happened. This is somebody who's been commissioned by the Roman emperor to produce an epic about the greatness of Rome, right? So there's a huge political bias in these things. It's not exactly like a work of like ideal historical scholarship here. Very politically laden. All right, now, when we talk about Romulus and Remus, right, we saw that they're the descendants of Aeneas, and that they are the grandchildren of Numitor, right? And Numitor gets into this fight with his brother Amulius. He gets deposed. Amulius takes his daughter, Rhea Silvia, makes her a Vestal virgin. She somehow still gets pregnant, right? And then floats her little babies down the Tiber River, and they wash up on shore near where the future city of Rome is going to be founded. And there they're suckled by this she-wolf, right? The Lupa. And then eventually taken in by a farmer by the name of Faustulus, who raises them until they're powerful enough and old enough to go take vengeance on Amulius and reinstate their grandfather Numitor to the throne of this little town called Alba Longa, right? And after they've done that, then they're like, well, what do we do now? Let's found one of the greatest cities that will ever like grace the face of the earth. So they go back to that spot along the river where they washed up, and they found the city of Rome. And we talked last time about the big debate that happened, right? Remus wants to found it on the Aventine. Romulus wants to found it on the Palatine. Eventually there's this big fight. Remus jumps over the walls of the Palatine that Romulus was starting to build. Romulus kills his brother and says this is going to happen to anybody who jumps over the walls of Rome. And we'll see that for a very long time that's actually true. Although we'll end today's class with a story of one of the conquests of people who are able to actually break through the walls of Rome and kind of put Rome to shame. And what we did, we closed last time, right, with one of the cool kind of looks at actual archaeology, right? We've got this kind of mythological story about Romulus and Remus. They kind of portray it as history, but really it's a myth about the founding of Rome. But when we look at the archaeology, one of the cool kind of things we learn is A, that some of the earliest habitation in the area that is now Rome was on the Palatine Hill, so that's kind of cool. B, we can see from the form of the houses that were on there, from these post holes and from the little like crevices here where the walls would have been, they very much resemble these Etruscan houses, and we can see those from these little urns where ashes of the deceased would have been placed. So you can actually go up there today, or whenever COVID ends, you can go over to the Palatine Hill. And they've got a little like plaque, right in front of the best preserved of these that says like the hut of Romulus. Probably wasn't actually the hut of Romulus, but these things do date to around the 8th century BC, which matches kind of sort of well with the mythological founding date of 753 BC. So everybody write that date down. I'm not sure I'm going to make you remember any dates except that one. Mythological founding date of Rome, 753 BC. April 21st for good measure. All right, so we have now got ourselves a city of Rome, and that's where we will pick up the story right now, after I hydrate using my vitamin ring. All right, so Romulus has got a problem, right? In the kind of days, what was the date? The date was April 21st, 753 BC. April 21st, 753 BC. That's the one you want to remember. I think it's the only date you have to remember in this class. Okay, so in the beginning, for Romulus' city, right, he's just founded this thing himself, and he needs people. And so what he does to get people is he goes around to the neighboring towns, and he's like, give me all of like your outcasts, right? Give me like the people who have been like criminals and foreigners and, you know, anybody who doesn't really belong there, like I'll take them in my new city of Rome, okay? And so in the earliest days, Rome is the city of A, all dudes, and B, these dudes are mainly like criminals, right? Who have been outcast from neighboring villages. And so Romulus is sitting there and he's got a problem, and he's like, this is like a sausage fest here, and we gotta have some babes in our town, or else this thing is only going to last a single generation, right? And so he emails out to like his neighboring like villages, right? And he's like, can we please have some babes so that we can like procreate and have like a successful city? And the little like towns next to him are like, obviously not. You cannot have our women like that. No, you can have your like crappy city of a bunch of criminal dudes, and good luck with that. So Romulus goes back home to his little hut up on the Palatine, and he starts thinking real hard. And he's like, I got a plan, all right? I'm gonna throw the greatest party the world has ever seen, right? And so he gets all these criminal dudes together, and he like starts preparing for the party, right? So they're getting the wine ready, and they're like decorating and all that stuff. And they email out to their neighbors from Alba Longa, right? So this is that town again that their grandfather ran for a while, and they're like, come check out our new city. We'll throw you a party. We'll have a bunch of wine. It'll be awesome. And the Alba Longans are like, okay, sounds good. We'll come check it out. And during the party, right, everybody's having a great time. They're playing music. They're drinking wine. Everybody's enjoying themselves until the moment where the Romans think like the guests have drunk enough. And then they kind of blow the horn and give the signal. And at that moment, right, these kind of other men who were in hiding pop out, and they basically snatch up all the women, right, who had attended the party with the Alba Longans. And they kick the dudes out of the city of Rome. They take the women back into their houses. And this event is known as the rape of the Sabines. Not in the traditional sense of the word rape that it's frequently used in terms of like sexual violence, but more in the sense of like the Latin word from which it comes, rapio, which means to seize, right? So think of it as like the seizing of the Sabine women. So this is one of the kind of fundamental events, the fundamental kind of like mytho-historical events of the very, very early city of Rome. They've kicked out the Alba Longan men. They've taken the women. And now now they at least have the potential to keep this civilization going. But you might be thinking, well, I bet the like guests did not take very kindly to that, right? And you're absolutely right? Like they're like, that was totally shitty and that sucked. Like, we are gonna come get our women back. And so this starts a series of wars between Rome and their neighbors, right, trying to get their women back. And one of the key episodes from that is another one of these kind of mythical, historical events known as the Treason of Tarpeia. All right, and so Tarpeia is a woman living in Rome now, and the Albolongans have come to her to conspire. Right, they want to get into the city. They want to get through the walls of Rome, and they see her, and they're like, "We're going to give you like everything on our wrists if you let us in, right? If you like open the gates and let us into the city of Rome." And this was like really important because at the time they were known for wearing like lots of like gold, right? Lots of jewelry upon their wrists. And so this is what Tarpeia thought she was getting. And when this actually happens and she lets the people in, one of the things that ends up happening is that they like twist the words, right? And instead of giving her all this jewelry that would have been found upon the arms of the intruders, they give her the shield instead, right? Which also goes on the forearm. And they like beat her to death with their shield, even though she was the one who led him into the city. And the wars continue, right? So like, and again, the battle between Rome and their neighbors. So this still doesn't settle it, right? So this leads to another skirmish. Eventually Rome's able to kick them out, and things are still not done. And then we get to the big battle. So eventually Rome ends up, or eventually the group ends up coming in, right? Bringing a full force, and they're doing battle, right? So it's the Albolongans and it's the Romans going at this, right? And in the middle of the battle, the women, the Sabine women, right, who are basically, they were in the houses of the Romans at the time, right? They're said to have come out into the middle of the battle and basically start yelling out everybody and putting them in their place. And they're like, "You, Albolongans, you guys are our brothers and you're our fathers. Cut this shit out." And then they points at the Romans. She's like, "You Romans, you guys are our new husbands, all right? We're not leaving you. We're with you now. That's the way it's going to be. Quit fighting our brothers and our husbands." And so they like jump into the middle of the battle and they're like, "You guys are acting foolish. You're acting like children. Enough of it," right? And so at that moment, right, the men are all ashamed. Apparently they're also like very naked. I don't know why they're fighting naked. Like, I would be not that worried about a helmet. You know, I'd be more worried about putting on some other clothes, but you know, it's very interesting. Anyway, so they put that to rest, and then the Romans and the Albolongans end up getting together to think about how this is actually going to work. And the way it's going to work, all right, is they come up with a system that says, hey, why don't, instead of like fighting against each other, we end up like kind of combining here, right? And we will work together to make Rome an incredibly flourishing city. And so the way it's going to work is that Romulus is going to be the first king of the city, right? He's a Roman. But after Romulus dies, the next king is going to be a Sabine, right? So the next king will come from this other group of people, all right? So at the end of Romulus's life, when you read this kind of mythical history, what ends up happening is they say he doesn't actually die. Like, he's out there with a bunch of the leaders, a bunch of the senators from the city. And even though they didn't have like a democracy, there were senators. That was just a term for like the founding fathers, basically, of the city, the families that were there from the beginning. And then there's this big storm that comes in, right? And smoke is boiling up from these sacrifices they were making, and the storm's coming in, there are clouds everywhere. There's lightning, a huge crash of lightning. And when things clear in the end, Romulus is just gone, right? He's just gone, and he's been taken up into the heavens to be some sort of hero or deity or something along those lines. So Romulus is the first king of Rome. He's descended from the Albolongans. It's actually the Sabines they were fighting. It might have been misspoken there earlier. But it's the Romans and the Sabines that get invited to the party, and then the Sabines and Romans who end up working out this deal that they're going to alternate kingship moving forward. Okay, so who are those kings? So this is really interesting. This is going to feel a lot like history, but it's also kind of mythology. When we look at the 7 kings of Rome, we can look at their like kind of mytho-historical dates right here, right? So Romulus 753 to 716, Numa Pompilius 715 to 674, boom, 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 all the way down to 509 BC. And what you're going to notice is that like each of these guys ruled for like 30 or 40 years. And that's how we know this is very, very unlikely to have actually happened, right? So you can absolutely have one king rule for like 30 or 40 years. That happens. Like Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, rules that long, and he's incredibly successful. But what you end up learning when you look at history is that that never happens like 7 times in a row, right? If you've ever heard the phrase like absolute power corrupts absolutely, that ends up playing itself out in Roman history, kind of with the kings right here, we'll see that, but also with the emperors a little bit later on. So Romulus is a Roman, right? He rules, at the end he's taken up magically into the heavens. And the next guy to take over the city of Rome is one of the great, the best named Romans in all of Roman history, this guy Numa Pompilius, all right? So Numa Pompilius is one of the Roman kings that is most closely associated with like piety, right? Devotion to the gods and religion. And so he spends a lot of his 30 or 40 year reign doing things associated with that. So Rome, after the Sabine situation, they spend the next like 30 years with Romulus in control fighting other towns. And Numa puts that to an end. He's like, we're not fighting anymore. We're going to be a peaceful people. He founds a couple priestly colleges. He moves the Vestal Virgins from where they were in Alba Longa to the city of Rome. He opens he founds the Temple of Janus. So Rome is at peace under Numa. And here's the important takeaway, right? So what you can kind of see when you look at the characterization of Romulus and the characterization of Numa, right, is that maybe there were people actually named this in Roman history. But really what we're seeing is like Roman authors later on trying to describe what the kind of key characteristics of a good Roman actually are, right? When you look at Romulus, you see like an incredibly successful warrior, right? A brave warrior, a courageous warrior, a very successful warrior in battle. And that's part of what makes a really good Roman. And when you look at Numa Pompilius, what you end up seeing is somebody who's pious, right? Somebody who respects the gods. And these two things, right? Piety and respect for the gods, as well as bravery and courage and success in war, these are two of the fundamental things that make a good Roman, right? And so even though they're applying these things to the first 2 kings of Rome that happened way back in the 700s BC, the people reading things like Virgil's Aeneid, right, or Livy's History of Rome, right around like much later on, around the time of Augustus, right around like, the 1st century BC, 1st century AD, they're supposed to be getting the same message, right? That what it means to be a good Roman is like, do your duty to the state in warfare, right? Go be courageous in war, but also be pious towards the gods. Now, we can start moving through. After Numa Pompilius, it goes back to one of the Romans, the next guy's name is Tullus Hostilius, all right? And you can kind of guess what this guy was kind of like. Hostile. That's where we get the word. And so he goes back to being like very heavily focused on warfare. In addition, one of the other things he does is he builds the first curia, or Senate house. And so you can actually still see a much later version of it in the Forum in Rome today. So it's this big brick building. This one dates to the first few centuries AD because it keeps getting burned down multiple times. But going all the way back to the time of the kings, there was a Senate house. known as the Curia, and this is where the early families, the early leading aristocratic families of Rome would have met to discuss affairs with the king. So other than that, Tullus Hostilius keeps fighting with other groups. And one of those groups is the neighboring Curatii, right? So that's the family, all right? And so the way that this ends up working out, right, is that there's a group of people, right? I believe it's the Albolongans. Somebody go figure that out for me. I think it is the Albolongans. But they're fighting with Rome now, and they're having another one of these big bloody battles. And the way that the story goes, right, is eventually the leaders are like, this is dumb, right? Like, why are we getting all of our people killed? Let's fight by proxy, right? We will take these series of 3 brothers, the Horatii in Rome, and the Albolongans will take the set of 3 brothers, the Curatii, right? The best warriors from both groups of people, and they will have like a 3-on-3 combat for like the fate of the city-states. And basically the way it's gonna work is whoever wins gets to incorporate the other people, right? So if the Albolongans win, they're gonna give up Rome and Rome will move over to Alba Longa. And if the Horatii win, then the Albolongans are gonna move out of their city and move to Rome. And so it starts out real bad for the Romans, okay? So 2 of the Horatii brothers get killed almost immediately, right? So now it's 3-on-1. But the last of the guys, real smart, right? Real smart and real fast. And so what he does, maybe this is not bravery in warfare, but he just starts running away, right? So he's like running away from the other 3 brothers. And eventually, right, the Curatii, they're chasing him. They're running away or they're chasing him down, right? And eventually they get spread out, right? So instead of 3 of them next to each other, the fastest of the Curatii kind of catches up with the last of the Horatius brothers. And then the last of the Horatii turns around and he kills that one guy. And then he starts running again, right? And he's running again, running away. And then they get spread out again. And then he turns around and kills the next guy. And then finally, it's 1-on-1, right? The last of the Horatii versus the last of the Curatii. And the last of the Horatii is able to win. Then Rome incorporates the population of Alba Longa into the city. And so this is one of the events where we start to see this merging of populations, right? With the Sabines, with the Alba Longans. One of the things Rome is going to do over the centuries is take populations and move them into the city of Rome, right? Okay, so that all happens under the reign of Tullus Hostilius. And then next up, we get another one of the Sabines. This guy, ANCUS Marcius, right? And he's another peaceful dude. He's known for starting one of the most famous cities in the Roman world, so the site of Ostia. And as you can see from this reconstruction here, Ostia literally means like the mouth. And what this is the mouth of the Tiber River. So it's where the Tiber River connects to the Mediterranean Sea. And so this becomes an incredibly important site. Here, I'll move out of the way so you can actually see the word Ostia. It becomes an incredibly important site for Rome because this is where any naval trade is coming into the city, right? Any naval trade from the rest of the Mediterranean goes through Ostia. In Ostia, the big Mediterranean boats get unloaded, cargo gets put onto smaller ships so that it can then move up the Tiber River, and then they can get to Rome itself. And once COVID's over and you make your way out to Italy, you 100% absolutely have to go to Ostia. Like outside of Pompeii, this is like the best preserved town that we have in Italy, essentially. You can see how much of the urban fabric is actually preserved here, right? The theater's incredibly well preserved. We've got this like marketplace over here where people would have had these like stalls selling their goods and wares. Just an incredibly well preserved town where you can see everything from houses to big public buildings to a lot of commercial establishments because it was a really, really economically important city. And you can see just how well preserved some of these buildings are today. All right, now for the 5th king of Rome, we get Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, also known as Tarquin the Elder. All right, and one of the things we see here is we can tell etymologically from his name that that what they're conceiving of is an actual kind of ethnic shift in the leadership of Rome. All right? So Tarquin ends up being an Etruscan name. And in fact, one of the most famous cities in all of Etruria was Tarquinia up here. And that site would have been named after the family of Tarquin. That's where he would have come from, and made his way down to Rome. Now, Tarquin the Elder ends up being a pretty good dude. And a lot of the super important developments in the city of Rome happen, or at least originate, under his rule. So one of the greatest, kind of crappiest, but also kind of greatest of his contributions is known as the Cloaca Maxima, or the Great Drain, okay? And that's what you're looking at right here. But basically what he does, Rome was a really swampy area at the time, okay? So you got the hilltops, people live on the hilltops, and everything in between there was kind of gross and swampy. You couldn't really live there. So he builds this great drain, this great sewage system that takes all that swampiness and gets rid of it, all right? And what that allows for is it allows for people to be able to inhabit the areas in between these different hills. So we see the Capitoline up here, the Palatine here where it was originally founded. Now you can use the space in between, and you use that for things like the Roman Forum and the Circus Maximus. So the Circus Maximus is created and started by Tarquin the Elder. It doesn't look like this under his rule. This gets built up over a long period of time. But that first area for chariot racing occurs under his rule. Now, the sixth king is a guy by the name of Servius Tullius, all right? And he's known for a couple big developments too, right? So we get the first coinage under Servius Tullius. And coinage is a really interesting kind of thing. It begins just by having blocks of bronze that are stamped with things, all right? Stamped with animals and stuff like that. And the stamp says basically that the government's inspected it and it actually is for real bronze. And eventually we get to coinage. This is known as an ice grave. This is huge. This is like a big coin, like this large here, right? And it's super heavy, right? It's like a heavy piece of bronze. So coinage in its earliest form really is a form of giving somebody a piece of metal as currency. And then that metal could be actually used for things like making a sword or some armor, so you're not having to fight naked in battle like the Romans and the Sabines. So that's one of the big developments of Servius Tullius. Next up, he is credited with building one of the first major city walls around the city of Rome. Now, we're going to find out that this probably actually didn't happen for a couple hundred years after him, but it's still called the Servian Wall because legend has it that it was built by Servius Tullius. And so you can see the remnants of that pretty well preserved here in Rome today. These giant tufa blocks. Tufa was a really cool stone because when you quarry it, when you take it out of the ground and it's kind of wet from the moisture in the ground, it's super soft. You can pick at it with a fingernail. And then once you take it out of the ground and it's exposed to air like this and it dries out, it becomes rock hard. So a great, great building material. And so you can see the remnants of the Servian Wall here. And then this big building behind it, this is the main train station in Rome. This is Roma Termini. And so when you fly into Rome and you take the Leonardo Express from the airport to the major train station in the heart of the city, this is where you'll get off. And when you come out of the train station, look to your right, and you're going to see the Servian Wall. And you'll be like, Servius Tullius, 6th king of Rome. You could also see it before you actually leave the train station. If you go down to the bottom floor, right? So you leave the main floor and you go down a level. There's a McDonald's down there, and it turns out that the Servian Wall goes straight through the McDonald's, which is a super bizarre experience. One, to be eating at a McDonald's at a train station in Rome. Two, to have your table over here bolted into the Servian Wall dating back to the 6th king of Rome. So very, very cool kind of meshing of cultures and ancient and modern, and also just kind of weird to see an ancient Roman wall going through a Roman McDonald's. Servius Tullius also completed the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus, or Jupiter Optimus Maximus. And for all of Roman history, this is the most important temple in the city of Rome, all right? And you can still go up to the Capitoline Hill, which gives its name to Jupiter Capitolinus. And when you go in the museums up there, museums where the building was actually created by Michelangelo, you can go down into the bottom of the basement of the building and you can see the foundations of the Temple of Jupiter. And then we get to our last king. This guy, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, also known as Tarquin the Proud. And this is where absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So far, the kings have all contributed positive things to the city of Rome and to the Roman people, right? Different contributions like coinage or Ostia or the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, right? It all falls apart here. Right, so he's the son of Tarquin the Elder, maybe the grandson, I forget which one, but he's related to Tarquin the Elder, and he decides he's just thrown all this stuff out the window. Okay, so he doesn't care anymore about respecting the Senate, anything like that. He decides he's going to start having his son decides he's going to start having his way with senators' wives, which is pretty messed up. And this results in an event known as the Rape of Lucretia, which is much more in line with the way that we actually think of that term today, where the son of the king actually forces himself upon the wife of one of the senators. And as a result, in the aftermath, this woman Lucretia ends up taking her own life. And this is kind of a weird thing where in antiquity, again, this is seen. And you see this in with the heroines of Greek mythology as well, where this idea of like not enduring such a seen as a shameful act in antiquity, that was actually seen as like a brave act by somebody who endured something like that. So she takes her own life, and this is the turning point in kind of Roman history at this time, right? This is the event where the senators decide, we're not taking this crap anymore. We're not going to deal with a king anymore. And they overthrow Tarquin the Proud, they kick him out of the city, and they end up founding the Roman Republic. So let's go ahead and do attendance. I will go ahead and give you guys 2 minutes for this. Go ahead and put in gray for today. At 11:46, we will pick back up with the next kind of step of the Roman Republic. And then we will go from there. All right, so we're just going to very, very briefly run through the very beginning of the Republic here, right? So what we end up seeing is that two guys, right? Lucius Junius Brutus, this guy that you see over here, and Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, this guy over here. Collatinus was the husband of Lucretia, all right? Okay, so hang on, 1 second. Okay, so these guys team up and lead the revolt against Tarquin the Proud, and they kick him out of the city in 509 BC. That's when Rome transitions from the monarchy to the republic. And in the republic, all right, the leading ideology, the number one thing that guides everything for the next like 500 years is no more kings in Rome, right? There will never be another king. And from here on out, there will always be two people at the same time in charge of like politics in Rome, right? And Roman politics is actually fairly complicated, but those two guys at the top are known as consuls. And the idea is A, they only rule for a year, right? So that what's the worst you can do if you're only in power for a year? And B, there are always two of them, right? So if one goes crazy and has some crazy ideas, the other one can balance him out. So that's the guiding ideology for Roman Republican politics for like 500 years. And what we'll see is at the end of it, right? If you ever take one of the Roman history classes, at the end, this all falls apart because those consuls get more and more powerful. The year-long like restriction goes away. They start taking the armies that they're in charge of and trying to fight each other with them. And it ends in an incredibly bloody civil war over the last century of the Republic. Okay, so Tarquin here escapes. And we'll just go through one or two of the legends of the early Republic here. But Tarquin escapes, goes back to Etruria, gets his group of Etruscans, and marches back on the city of Rome. In the city of Rome at the time, right, the Etruscans are on the west side of the Tiber River here, so over here on this side. Rome is on the right side of the river, and the only bridge connecting them is right here, known as the Sublician Bridge, right? And so Rome has got to defend that bridge from the Etruscans. And it's this guy right here, brave old Horatius Cocles, who does the defending. So Rome is there. They're ready to defend against the Etruscans over here, right? And it's not going well for the Romans. And so Horatius Cocles says, look, fellow Romans, I got this, all right? You guys behind me, right? Like just retreat. And as you retreat, like destroy the bridge. If there's no bridge, they can't come across, they can't take the city. So I will fight them off. I will buy you some time. You go ahead and destroy the bridge as you retreat, and that will save the city. And there are two stories. At the very last second, according to one story, he jumps into the river and is saved by the river goddess, the goddess of the river Tiber. And according to another story, he drowns. Either way, he's remembered as one of these Roman heroes. And the last guy we'll end with today, Mucius Scaevola, all right? So the Etruscans are still set up on the far side of the river, and Rome sends this guy to infiltrate their camp and kill the leader, a guy by the name of Lars Porsena. And so he's there, he infiltrates the camp, he's ready to do the assassination, and he like messes up the guy, right? He actually like tries to kill the like right-hand man of Lars Porsena, the Etruscan leader. And so he's found out, and what he does is the heroic thing. So he takes his hand and he sticks it into the fire, this brazier right here, and he lets his hand burn off. And as his hand is burning off, he's telling Lars Porsena that I am the first of 300 Romans who have sworn to kill you. And after I die, if you kill me, like the next one will come, and then the next, and the next. And he's saying this as he's demonstrating his bravery, watching his hand burn off. And by the end of this, Lars Porsena is so scared of the whole thing that he packs up his Etruscans and heads back to Etruria, and he's like, I am not messing with these crazy Romans. And so much like we saw with early Romulus and Numa, what we're seeing with people like Horatius Cocles and Mucius Scaevola are the embodiment of Roman values, right? Bravery and courage in warfare and doing work on behalf of the city-state of Rome. that's where we'll wrap up today. I hope you guys have a wonderful couple days, and I will see you all Friday. Have a good one, everyone.